Hey, have you ever looked down at your fretboard and you're like, I have no clue what is happening? Like, it's a big, giant puzzle that seems unsolvable, right? Well, let me tell you, it's not your fault. And I know it's not your fault because I once was a beginner too, and I also tried to learn how to fretboard work the traditional way, right? All YouTube videos and books and instructors try to teach theory and how the fretboard works with complicated theory jargon words like mixolydian, fifth degree, flat in the third, and I don't know what those words mean. You probably don't know either, right? So how are we supposed to learn the fretboard if we don't know the words our instructors are using to teach us? So let me teach you how the fretboard works with no theory jargon words, as I teach inside of my best-selling book. You can check it out later if you want, but I guarantee by the end of this video, you'll have a full understanding of your entire fretboard and how it works. And make sure you stick till the end because we're gonna wrap it all up and you're gonna understand one of the most difficult concepts for guitarists to grasp. Are you excited? It's gonna be so much fun. Let's start by talking about the musical alphabet. The musical alphabet has the same names, the same letters as the normal alphabet, and it goes from A to G. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay, so let's talk about notes, for example, right? So let's use the fifth string as an example because it starts in A. I like the fifth string starts in A, same as the normal alphabet. So we've got those 7 names on our A string. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then back to A again. It starts all over again. A, B, C. Everything beyond the 12th fret is the same as from the open string till the 12th fret, right? The 12th fret is the same as the open string. But you probably grasped that I'm skipping some frets sometimes, right? So there's actually not 7 notes in the musical alphabet. There's 12 notes. Oh, great. Now what do? I wish they would have done this easier, but they didn't. So in between some of those letters, there's other notes. 7 names, 12 notes. I know, it's confusing. So let's start with A, and in between A and B, there's another note, and we're gonna call that A sharp. Sharp meaning 1 fret higher from A. A sharp, higher meaning that way. Lower in pitch, meaning that way. Okay, so we've got A sharp, and then we've got B, and here's where it's confusing. From B to C, there's no jump. So from B to C, there's 1 fret. From C to D, there's 2, so there's a note in between. We've got a C sharp. D, from D to E, there's 2 frets, so we've got a D sharp in between. Then we've got E. From E to F, there's no sharp. So we've got F. From F to G, there's 2 frets, so we've got an F sharp in between. From G to A again, there's 2 more frets, so we've got a G sharp. So now we've got the 12 names for notes on the fretboard. And every one of your strings on the guitar has those 12 notes. There's no more notes. There's only 12. But different strings start on a different note. So for example, the 6th string, the thickest string, starts on E. If we follow the sequence, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. Now we start again on the musical alphabet, right? A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E again. Every one of your 6 strings holds those 12 notes. But the cool thing is that chords follow the same sequence. So let's go back to A because it's the easiest one to understand. It starts right in the beginning, right? So that's an A note, and this is an A sharp note, right? So if this is an A chord, and I move all the notes, the open strings too, that create that A chord, if that A note became an A sharp note, that A chord, I place my finger behind it so I can move the notes that are left open, is going to become an A sharp chord. One note becomes another note, one chord shape. That's why I think teaching chords is a mistake. Teaching chord shapes makes you understand how the fretboard works. Check it out. We've got A chord. If we treat it as a shape and we move all the notes that create that A chord at the same time, now we have an A sharp chord. It's still using an A shape, and I'm moving all the notes together. The next letter in the musical alphabet is going to be a B chord. The next one, a C chord. C sharp chord. D chord. D sharp chord. Still the same shape. I'm only using one shape to play all chords, right? Next one, E chord. F chord. F sharp chord. G chord. G sharp chord. And if I move beyond the 12th fret, I've got my A chord again. Difficult to fret on an acoustic. Wow, if we treat, instead of a chord, we treat it as a shape, we can move that shape to create all basic chords. So how many shapes are there in the guitar? How many shapes can we use to move across the fretboard to play any chord? Well, you know those shapes already. They taught them to you the first day, and they're your open chords. They're your A, your C, your D, your E, and your G. In any one of those chord shapes, you can move across the fretboard to play any chord. For example, let's move an E shape, right? So an E shape, you're probably fretting like this. I'm gonna switch my fingers so that I can place a bar behind it and start moving it across the fretboard to play any chord. So E, 1 fret higher in pitch, that way, right? It's gonna become an F. Isn't that your normal F? But it's using an E shape. That's why it's important to think in shapes. Then we've got an F sharp, a G sharp, an A. We start again in the beginning of the alphabet because it ended. Now we start again. An A sharp, a B, a C, and so on. Now here's what's extremely cool, and this is a concept that it takes so long for beginners to understand. Let's rearrange those chords and spell them differently. What do they spell now? Caged. Okay, so there's 5 chord shapes that I can move across the fretboard, and they spell caged. So what does caged mean? Let's start with the first chord, the first letter, the first shape. It's a C shape. So you probably know that chord shape, right? The C chord shape. What's the next letter in caged? Remember, caged are shapes. They're not chords anymore. They're shapes that we're going to move across the fretboard. The next letter is A. So we're going to move an A shape till we find a C chord. So A sharp, B, C. So caged is telling us what chord shape we can use next to play the chord we're looking for. We're looking for C chords, and we used the C shape, and then we used an A shape, moved up the fretboard. So if we follow caged, the next shape we're gonna use to play a C chord is gonna be G. Let's see if that is true. G is a very uncomfortable shape to move in its entirety. You can always break it up, and I'll talk about that later. But that's a G chord with my index freed up so I can follow that chord shape and move all the strings that are left behind, all those notes, following G. So we've got G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C. So following caged, we found 3 ways we can play C, a C chord, with 3 different chord shapes. All right, we started with a C shape, then we moved to an A shape, and then we moved to a G shape. That's terrible. Much better. If we follow caged, the next shape we're gonna use to play a C chord is gonna be an E shape. E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C. So now we found 4 ways to play a C chord using every one of those 5 shapes. We've still got one more to go, which is D, the D shape. So I'm gonna fret it like this. This is also a pretty uncomfortable shape to use. So we've got a D sharp. Remember, we're moving that D chord shape up the musical alphabet, creating new chords. E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C. So now we found 5 ways to play a C chord using Caged. Cage is telling us all the shapes we have available to play the same chords, and it's giving us the sequence of what shape to use. But here's what's extremely cool and super simple. Every one of those chord shapes has what we call a root note. And I'm gonna color that note red. That note is the one that defines the name of the chord. So in open position, if I play an A, we've got 2 root notes. We've got this one and this one. And both of those notes are A notes. That's why it's called a root. That's why it's called an A chord in open position, because this one over here is an A note. If I play a C chord shape in open position, that's a C chord. And this one over here and this one over here are C notes. Those are root notes, and they're called roots. They're naming the chord in open position because that's a C note. So now, if I find any note on the fretboard, any note, let's just say I find this one over here, I can play that chord. How? Well, if that's a root note, I can move my chord shape to that position and play that chord. So what chords have that root note on the 5th string? We've got 2. We've got a C shape and we've got an A shape. I play that chord just by knowing that note. Okay, let's do another one. Whatever, this one over here. What chord shapes have that note on the 3rd string? What a red note on the 3rd string? Okay, I've got an A shape and I also have a G shape. So now I can play that chord without even knowing what chord it is. I just found a note and applied the chord shape on top of that note, knowing that's a root note, to play that chord. But we can even go further than this. So for every one of those chord shapes, I'm gonna introduce another color, another note, and I'm gonna call it a blue note. The blue note is responsible for creating the mood of the chord, the flavor of the chord. So let's get an A shape, for example. A is my favorite, so easy to understand. That A, we already discovered we have those red notes, but we also have that blue note. So listen to the difference in sound if I move that blue note 1 fret lower in pitch. If I minorize that note, listen to the difference in sound. Oh, it went darker, right? It went from happy to pretty sad. So the difference between a major chord and a minor chord is just that blue note. Check it out. So A major chord. Now I'm gonna get that note and minorize it to create a minor chord. A major chord sounds happy, and a minor chord sounds pretty sad. And that's the only difference between a major chord and a minor chord. All other notes stay exactly the same. There's only one note that changes. And if you look at your C and G shapes, now you'll know why we don't have a C minor shape in open position or a G minor shape in open position, because they have 2 blue notes, and one of those blue notes is behind the nut. So there's no more frets. We can go that way. We can't minorize that note further to create a minor chord. Now, here's the extremely fun part. We still have some notes missing in each of our chord shapes. I'm gonna color those notes green now. So by looking at those diagrams, how many colors does each chord shape have? 3, right? We've got red, blue, and green. So it turns out that basic chords are created by playing 3 notes together, 3 colors. Each one of those diagrams is a tri-colored chord. So have you heard of the word triad? Tri means 3. And if we have 3 colors for each chord shape, we're getting somewhere, right? A triad is the simplest form to play a basic chord using 3 notes. Turns out every one of those chord shapes has 3 notes, 3 colors. So let's come back to finding any note. For example, this one, right? I'm going to create a major chord from that note, which is a red, like this. For example, I'm going to use a C shape, and now I have that chord. But if I color that chord with the 3 colors, now I can also find my triads. Any combination of those 3 colors is going to give you a triad of that chord that we found using the red note. So I'm only going to use consecutive strings. With that, I mean strings that are close together without jumping strings to keep things simple. So I've got a little triad here, I've got a little triad here, and I've got a little triad here. Pretty awesome, pretty simple, right? What's the next shape I can use to play that chord? This shape. So where are my triads there? They're here, and they're here. Pretty simple stuff. If we combine both chord shapes together, look how many triads we can find. But here's the extremely cool thing. Remember, what's the difference between a major chord and a minor chord? That blue note moves 1 fret lower. So if I wanted to find all my minor triads, I would just have to move all those blue notes 1 fret lower, and I could also find all my minor triads. This is child's play, right? And we use 0 theory jargon. If you want to know more on how the fretboard works, go and check out this book. The link is going to be down there. Let me show you inside. So here you have it, the Ultimate Guitarist Chord Book. Everything you want to know about chords is included in this book. And it's meant for everyone. We start right in the beginning, identifying your chord shapes and how to change through them fast, right? See the colors I was telling you about in the video? How to switch through chord shapes quickly. We talk about finger stretching exercises for elder players and how to change through chords fast. How to transform those chords into other chords by just moving a couple notes like we did with the minor chords, right? We also talk about easy chord progressions that you can play right away. We talk about bar chords and how to make them sound clean and how to switch through them fast. How to move them up the fretboard, moving the C chord shape, the D chord shape, sharps and flats. We also got caged, explained in detail and how it works. We also talk about triads and how to find them for every chord shape across the fretboard. We talk about all the other chords, like how to create major chords, minor chords, sus chords, 5 chords, 7 chord, major 7, 6, augmented, diminished, all chords, all theory explained in detail with colors, no complex theory jargon. We also talk about chord voicings by genres, like what different types of music use, what chords do they use to play that kind of music, right? We talk about chord progression theory, the circle of fifths, minor chord progressions, how to create your own chord progressions. We also have a chord library to know how to fret every one of your chord shapes, how to fret your triads, your open chords, your bar chords. This book is exceptional. Everything you want to know about chords is included in this book. Go and check it out. The link is going to be down there, printed in color and spiral bounded, so it lays flat on your desk and you can learn easily.